Skre, who's going to take us to Norway and talk us through a very complex and long-term project with some fantastic results, and that's the Avaldsnes Moormanna project.
Good enough. Avaldsnes. Old Norse Ogvaldsnes, and it's a very interesting name and rather unique actually. Ogvald is a male name, a man's name, and Nes means promontory. Yeah, you can see it's like that. We have these sponsors. This is a rather unique project, also in the funding. It's I was invited by the local municipality whether I would come and have a look at the site, and we had some discussions, and they showed me the site, and they said, well, what would it cost? And I said, £3 million. And they said, okay. And they got the money from local banks, shipping. It's regional. This was when the oil price was rather high. So there's oil and shipping money in it, and then the municipality. And now it's developed into, well, first there was a preparation phase of 1.5 years, then there were 2 years of excavation, 2011 and 12, and then since then we've been doing working on the publication, first the reports of course, and then the publication. And now in a year's time I hope the first volume will be launched, which will be about the excavation and the local context, and then in 19 the final the second volume will be launched, which will be perspectives on the long history of the emergence of kingship from the Roman period and into the well, what you call the High Middle Ages, and what we call, well, the 12th, 13th century. So these are the institutions involved in the publication work, and the people, well, people working at these institutions are writing pieces and bits of chapters or whole chapters in the second volume. And as you can see, it's a rather international bunch. First, the structure of this paper, this talk, is first to say something about the landscape setting of this site, and the vast context of landscape, transport and landscape structure, which is it's set in, which is basic for understanding it. And then I will show you what we knew about Avaldsnes before we started excavating. That's the first half of my talk, and then I will run you through the excavation results chronologically as the second half. Norway means the Northern Way, and it's the only country I know of which has its name after a transport route and not after some tribe, or and it doesn't contain a name element which alludes to territory. It's the Northern Way, it's the transport route, it's the sailing route along the coast. So this, what you see here, this on the left of this line, that's the original Norway. That's the route, the area where you find the sailing route, which is mainly protected by islands. So it's a protected sailing route, for the most part, along the coast up to here, where the most northern Germanic peoples were living in this period, the first millennium. The line follows the mountain. There's a mountain ridge running here, dividing present-day Norway in what traditionally is called south of the mountains, Sunnafjells, south of the mountains, and this is north of the mountains. So the old Norway region was north of the mountains. This is Avaldsnes, Ogvaldsnes, this area here, and it's on an island called Kolmt, today Kalmøy. It means a barrier towards the ocean outside. This is towards the northwest. And the sailing route, well, you can't really see it there because there's some islands. You'll see it in a later picture. There you can see it. This is from the south. Avaldsnes is here. This is the island of Kormt, and this is the sailing route, protected from the ocean by this island. It's sort of a barrier. You can sail safely inside. This is this look westwards shows you the rough areas out here with lots of islands and skerries, and it's very dangerous to navigate there. So if you want to be safe, you sail on the inside, and then the guy who sits here controls the whole traffic. So that's the Northway, and as you can see, it's runs up here, and then there's an exposed stretch there before you get into protected waters further north. So sailing from the south, you had to wait here for weather. If there was rough weather, you had to wait here to get on. So it's very convenient if you want to control the traffic along the coast. I guess you also see that the land here is not very fertile. It's pasture. And so the reason why the kings sat here is not because these are the rich regions. It's rather I have a picture showing that. Yeah, these are the rich regions. These are the Siedlungsraum, as the Germans call them, in the fjords. This is where the soil is deep and where there's no heavy wind. There's access to rich resources in the woodlands and mountains, and it's very, very fertile. The temperature is higher, and well, this is where we find the rich finds, rich grave finds through the whole first millennium, and also in the Bronze Age. So this is where the aristocracy sat, but nevertheless, we find the earliest royal manors mentioned in the sagas from the 12th, 13th centuries are all in this outer regions along the Northern Way. This is Avaldsnes. These are the five: Utstein, Avaldsnes, Fitjar, Alrekstad, and Seim. But in here, that's where the rich agrarian resources are. And also in these areas, and also so they're inside. So and between the fjords there are high, steep mountains. So to get anywhere, to travel, you have to travel out the fjords. Fjord is related to the word fara, to fare. The fjord is where you fare. So you sail out the fjord and then out in the Northern Way, and then along the coast. So the key to controlling this land is not to force yourself on people in these areas. The most convenient way to subdue them is to sit out there and control the traffic. So that's my idea why the name of the country became Norway. It's literal. If you control the sailing route, you control the land. So the control of the sailing route is the key to controlling the land. So they were first kings of the sea. They were sea kings. They were not land kings. Now to Avaldsnes, and I start by citing a couple of episodes in the Snorri Sturluson's royal sagas. This is a Norwegian text. It tells a story from Olav Tryggvason's time, the late 990s. He was visited by some sorcerers. He was sitting at Avaldsnes and he was visited by some sorcerers, but he managed to overman them, and they were put on a rock, underwater rock, and then killed by the rising tide. So they were drowned, and there's a rather famous drawing of them. They look rather beautiful, I think. Of course, locals can point out the rock. It's just outside the Avaldsnes. It's called Skrateskjær. So, and that story is not very credible. It has sort of mythical elements. But this story, which takes place around 1020, is more credible, because it connects to historic persons and real historic conflicts which are known from several sources. It's King Olav who became the saint, died 10 years later, and his conflict with a local chieftain in Rogaland and his nephew. And the conflict took place or had its core at Avaldsnes. And this is a famous drawing from the Saga edition. And so that's a credible episode from the sagas, which is connected to Avaldsnes and which connects kings to Avaldsnes. This is a rather difficult passage. It's about the death of the first. The guy is considered the first king of Norway, Harald Fairhair, who died in the early 10th century. And Snorri gives a very detailed account of the place where he was buried, and there's a big stone there, and so and so. And it's not at Avaldsnes, but it's right across the sailing route there on the other side. And the description is so detailed that clearly Snorri was there, and we know he visited the region in 12, 18, 19, and he has been there and talked to people, and his description must be based on his own that visit, and he must also have recorded local tradition. So this is, well, not firmly established, but it's believed to have a historical core by most historians, although there were 300 years between the event and Snorri's visit. Now to the existing monuments at Avaldsnes. This church, I will come to it, it's built in the mid-13th century by the then king Håkon Håkonsson, one of his 14 royal chapels, where he had his own clergy. But just north of the king, there's this amazing stone. It's now 7.2 meters. The top has been knocked off. It leans towards the church, and legend says that the day it touches the church will be the end of the world. So the priests at Avaldsnes tend to climb up there and knock off some pieces now and then, to take history in their own hands, you could say. So today it's 10.4 centimeters from the wall. This is one of the highest, if not, well, possibly the highest raised stone in Scandinavia. But it's not it was one of a part of a monument. We have this drawing from 1811. The stone is standing, well, we can't see it, it's just behind the tower there. But we see there's a stone standing there, just south of the church, and that's the remains. The vicarage burnt down in 1698, and then it's recorded that also the stone standing south of the church was partly destroyed. So this is just a remain of the stone. So that's then we know of two stones, and we have also writings, local writings, saying that it was as high as the other one. So if those two are put into a map, where the church is removed, you have one stone there, the northern one, and then the southern one, which is gone. And if we assume that this is a triangle, which is the normal kind of monument from the late Roman period, migration period, 5th, 6th century, there's space for that, a triangle of 30 meters between the stones. And on the former photo we saw a great mound there, north of the church. It's called Flagghaug, and drawing was made in 1811. The mound was excavated in 1834 by the local priest. He needed some soil for the cemetery. The soil cover is rather shallow out here, and there were new laws regarding the depth of graves, so he needed some soil. So he dug it out and spread the soil on the cemetery. Luckily, he had a relative who was an antiquarian in Bergen, and he wrote to him and asked, "What should I do? How should I do this?" And he got some pretty good advice. So the finds were taken care of, and there's also some written documentation on the excavation. Just before I move on to what he found, I would point out there's this mound, which is 40 meters in diameter, 5 meters high, and then there's a small mound here, so which is we now know Bronze Age mound. So there has been 2 mounds. So normally I tease the Danes that this is where Harald Bluetooth got the idea of 2. Maybe there was a small church here when he conquered Norway, he says on this stone, and so he must have been here. So, and if there was 2 mounds with a small church between, well, he got the idea to the southern mound, and that's why he built a mound in Christian times in Jelling. He thought it was nice. Well, the northern mound, what was found there? Here we see it has been located here, so it was very visible from the sea. There's a rather, I will come back to this several times, there's a steep slope here, and then this plateau where the settlement and these monuments were located. And they were, of course, this is taken from the north, and when you sail past out here, you see these monuments towards the sky, even in summer nights. What did he find? Well, he found these 3rd century items. The state of preservation is not very good, but when that's disregarded, this is an extremely rich male grave from the Roman period. Some say it's the richest Roman period male grave in Scandinavia. I wouldn't enter into that competition, but nevertheless it is extremely rich. And I will show you some of the items. 3 Roman bronze vessels, and a sieve. That's not common. There's this unique gold torque, 600 grams, and it must have been sitting around the neck of the guy. And then there's this enigmatic gold foil, which many have tried to decipher, but it's the motive is very, very destroyed, and the attempts are not totally convincing, I think. And then there's a couple of gold rings, very nice ones, and then there's this silver. What do you call them? Well, they've been sitting on a drinking horn, a huge drinking horn. And then there's the sword, very nice thing, Roman sword, at least of a Roman type. And this, which have been interpreted in different ways, but everybody agree now that it's a shield boss in silver, and with some remains of gilding. To find parallels to these finds, this kind of equipment, you have to go to the Danish weapon sacrifices from the same period. There's a huge sacrifice, weapon sacrifice in early 3rd century, Ilre Bordal plus A, which was where the weapons of an army of some 700 men or something have been thrown into the lake. And there are rather close parallels to the Owl's Nest equipment and to Scandinavian weapon graves in general. Jørgen Ilkjær, who has been working on this material for many years, divides the equipment into three levels. This is normal soldier equipment, mainly consisting of iron objects. And then there's a level of officers which have copper alloy equipment. And then there's a small group of 6 or 7 leading officers, top officers, and one of them have even finer equipment than the others, and that's probably the leader of the army. And Jørgen Ilkjær has gone into the Scandinavian grain material to find parallels to these levels, and this very top level, he found one parallel in the whole of Scandinavia, and that is the Flagghaug grave at Owl's Nest. Yeah. And this is his one of his maps. You see the weapon sacrifice sites in Denmark here. I believe this is Ilreborg, isn't it? Or one of these at least. And the parallels to this equipment he finds in this area, and Owl's Nest is here. So the armies came from the Scandinavian peninsula, the western part of the Scandinavian peninsula. So this is the kind of guy who was buried at Owl's Nest, a military leader. And one of the weapon sacrifice finds, the Nydam finds, has a ship in it and also a couple of small boats. So they were sea-borne. Well, then on to our excavations. These things we knew before we started. As I said, we excavated in 2011 and 12, and you can see the excavations are ongoing here, out here, and this is where Flagghaug was located. This is the St. Mary's sewing needle, as it's called, the raised stone, and then the southern mound is here. And I will show you two buildings and an economy area. The first building is located here on the same edge of the plateau as the two mounds. So it was part of and the raised stone. So it was part of a sort of display of power towards the sailing route out here. So that's one building, and then there's a building here, and then there's an economy area south of this mound, and then there's a boathouse down here. So bear that general layout in mind while I run you through the evidence. First, this building on the church parking lot. It was a parking lot, and it had been leveled, very roughly leveled. And you can see these stripes which emerged when we took off all the gravel and things. These stripes are from the teeth of the excavator's shovel, and they run straight through the hearth of Roman period, late Roman period, migration period, whole building. You can see the wall trench of the whole building here. Well, it's rather vague. In the next photo, it's been excavated, so you can see it more clearly. But the remains of this whole building is this trench with some post holes in it, and this hearth, and then some faint remains of the trench on the western side there. Here you can see this is western Norway, it's almost raining. So this is the wall trench emptied, and they are there currently excavating the hearth. This is the layout of the whole building. It's 20 meters long. We consider that very short in Scandinavia. And then there's the wall trench and the hearth in the middle, exact middle of the building, and then these faint remains of the corresponding wall trench on the other side. The dating of this building is 4th, 5th and early 6th century. And it's one of a few very, very early hall buildings, the earliest generation of hall buildings in Scandinavia. And until now, such buildings have been found only in Sweden and Denmark. Gudme is one of them, as Mats showed earlier. They have not been located anywhere in Norway until now. There are very few, and they come as we see that there's a strong militarization of the Scandinavian societies. Weapon graves are become numerous, and we have hill forts, lots of them, hundreds of them, and there's evidently and we have these weapon sacrifice finds. Evidently, there's a strong militarization of society, and the main understanding of these, I believe most scholars agree that they have a strong. It's sort of a mixture between a representative building and a residence. At least that's how I prefer to understand them. It's where the king resides with his warriors. Perhaps they sleep there, perhaps not. At least it's a feasting hall and a reception hall. Very fittingly for a place, the manor where this guy was buried with this exquisite equipment. So it's located between these two mounds, as I said, and the two standing stones, a third one possibly here. And you see the steep slope, and so they were very visible seen from the seaside. The next building is a totally different type of building, and it's located in here. Could not be seen probably from the sea, and it's what we call a longhouse. Because of modern disturbances, which were, well, you saw the shovel teeth. We couldn't trace it for more than 30 meters. These paper plates, indicate post holes. But you see there's two rows here, and then there's a hearth here, and an entrance here, and an entrance there. These buildings are multifunctional. There are hay. Well, what do you call it? Where you store the hay? And there are barns and stables and living quarters and workshops in sections along this building. We have buildings of that type from this period up to 60 meters long, and the ground here could accommodate a building of at least that length. So the extent of it we don't know, but we know the width, and it was 8 meters wide, which is more about a meter wider than any other from this period. So it's been and the post holes are like 60-70 meters. Well, they have accommodated posts of 60-70 centimeters in diameter. So this has been an extraordinary building. Modest. And here are some reconstruction drawings just to illustrate what type of building it was. So I've showed you these two buildings, and now I'm going to show you the economy area down here, this yellow area, and just south of the Southern Mound. And afterwards I'm moving to this boathouse. This is the Southern Mound. It's not easily seen, but it's a mound. And the economy area is this area. Also heavily destroyed by modern disturbances, or well, through the centuries actually, but enough to see that there has been extensive production here, both processing of agricultural produce, cereal drying, and also metalwork. This is a section, and you see the cultural deposits here, and this is a furnace. The boathouse down by the sea, it wasn't very visible. Cultivation has sort of evened out the ground, but we were suspicious of this small depression. You can see a small depression here, and we put in some trenches and did some core drillings. These are our trenches, and the black dots are drillings, and we reconstructed two phases of a boathouse, which we didn't get the lower end of it because of a road, but we based on sea levels and the dating, it's contemporary with the two other buildings. We believe it could accommodate a ship of close to 20 meters length, which is well, not a full Nydam ship, which I showed you, but close. And then yeah, so that's we have a rather detailed picture of the manor from the 4th century to the mid 6th century. All these features coincide there. That mound, these two stones, possibly a third, the whole building, the longhouse, the economy area, and this boathouse. And also we've excavated cultivated fields out there, and we have cultivation from that period, actually back to the Bronze Age out there. But then, in the mid 6th century, there is some sort of collapse, or in Scandinavian societies, at least on the most markedly on the Scandinavian peninsula. Lots of farms are abandoned, and cultivated fields are overgrown. There's some kind of collapse, disaster, something, and when settlement reappears, the remains of the settlement of houses and other features in settlements are not that easily distinguished. So settlement archaeology is much easier before 550 than in the following couple of centuries. And this is also so at Avaldsnes. But we have a couple of structures. This red thing here is a stone paving or stone construction. Doesn't seem much, but most of these stones cannot be lifted by a single man, and some of them can't be lifted by numerous men. They're huge, and it extends all the way down there, and it's lying on the edge of the plateau. You see the steep slope down here, and we have no other interpretation of it than fortification. It has the same appearance, and well, it's constructed in the same way as fortifications in hill forts from this period and the period before. This is what we call the Merovingian period, the 7th, 8th centuries, sometimes probably 7th. It's very hard to date because there are no finds, but it's from structures beneath and above. We place it in that period. So this is seems to be what you have lots of examples of in in the UK and also in Sweden. There are 40-50 fortified settlements, but in Western Scandinavia, and there are, well, we don't know any other. We believe it's a fortified, remains of a fortification around the settlement in this area. However, the remains of the settlement are very, very elusive. In this economy area, we have post holes and features from this period, that is from the 600 and up, all the way up to the 11th century. So there is activity going on. There is economic activity going on, production, processing, but we haven't found the proper buildings. We have found this spearhead, though. It's a late 8th century thing. So spearheads or weapons in the settlement site is rather rare. So it's perhaps significant. And this is these are the remains from the 600s up to the 900s of economic activity. Small post holes, small hearths, perhaps a windscreen, no proper buildings in this area. This is the stone construction. So there was activity, but we know very little about it, regrettably. Around Avaldsnes, though, there are a couple of rather telling remains. This is Avaldsnes. This is the site Grønhaug, which was a huge grave mound, and this is Storhaug, also a huge grave mound. Both of them contain ships. They were ship graves, actually the two earliest Scandinavian ship graves, and they've been now dendrodated to the 80s and 90s. There was just 10-12 years between them. They were rowing ships, probably. These are the remain of the Storhaug ships, and you can see the holes for the oars there. And there's no, well, the remains are scant, as you see, but probably they couldn't say. So, although we don't have significant evidence from Avaldsnes, this is still an area along this strait of where there were prestigious burials, at least. And then this is the Oseberg ship, as you know, and everybody knows it's excavated 100 years ago, a bit more than that, by the Oslofjord. But when dendrodates were made of this and the Gokstad and the tuna ships in the early 90s, they could date this ship, but they couldn't make it fit into the regional curve, dendro curve, which was built up for the Oslofjord area. So it was a mystery. The Gokstad ship was built in the Oslofjord area, but it was a mystery where this ship was built until a couple of creative guys, Frans Arne Stilgard and Nils Bonde, got the idea to compare this profile with these, the Grønhaug and the Storhaug ships, and they were from the same region. So this ship was built in the Avaldsnes area and then in around 820 and sailed around the coast to Vestfold by the Oslofjord. We lack, as I said, we lack evidence of proper buildings in the Viking period. We have some, as I said, there's activity going on in the economy area, and then post holes reappear in the hall area. My time is out, really, isn't it? I'll be quick. In the 10th century, so there are substantial post holes in the 10th century further north, just south of the church, but they can't be pieced together to buildings. But there were buildings there. And then, when 2 weeks of the excavation in 2012 remained. We found this, you can see there's this line of stones and there's charge in between. So it turned out to be a substantial masonry wall, more than a meter high, hidden beneath garden deposits from the 17th century. The vicar built a very nice garden. We know it from paintings, but we didn't know that there was a medieval ruin beneath. So it turned out to be the cellar floor, a room of 50 square meters internally, and it extends further north, but we didn't have the time to excavate it. They're trying now to collect money for an excavation next summer. We'll see when that succeeds. But it's a rather unique thing, actually. Masonry buildings are common in the UK and on the continent, but in Norway there are very few. We have 350 churches. But this is a royal manor, and masonry buildings in royal manor we have only 3 of before. We knew only 3 before. That's in Bergen, in Tønsberg, and in Oslo. And if we add Avaldsnes, that's the 4 sites where the king in the late 13th, early 14th century had his ecclesiastical centers. They were his main royal administrative and ecclesiastical centers. He had his own clergy, exempt from the authority of the bishop. He attained that. He got the privilege from the Pope in that period and was allowed to have his own priests. And we believe that this complex has been built to accommodate when this permit from the Pope was attained, and he built this masonry complex for the priest. And in that period there are 7 royal letters written at Avaldsnes, which supports that this now became a more important royal site. Further west we found this nicely paved road, which we believe is from the same. It's 1.20 meters wide, and we believe it's from the same period. I'll show you why in a second. But first, this subterranean passageway excavated in the mid-1980s. There was a tradition at Avaldsnes that there was such a passageway just south of the church, but no archaeologists or antiquarians believed it. But actually, then suddenly they found it, and it was excavated. It's rather narrow and a meter high, so you can crawl through it. And here you see the location of these different elements. This is the cellar we found, which, as I said, extends further. This is a church, which was built in the mid-13th century. This is a subterranean passageway, and this is the paved road. So they all fit into a nice rectangle, as you see. So this is a planned and built complex built at the same time. This, the outside of this walls align perfectly with the eastern wall of the chancel. So this is the heyday of the royal manor. In 1364, it's burnt down by the Hansets. There were conflicts between the king and the Hansets, and after that, it never retained its position and became a vicarage, which still is, with this prominent royal chapel. Thank you.
Thanks very much for such a
sorry for you.
Deep insights. Okay. We have some time for discussion, but perhaps we just have a few questions direct for this paper first. Double.
The difficulty of seeing your Viking period buildings, I mean, is this something that there's a problem more generally in the region?
It is.
And what do you think is going on there? Do you think it's the construction style at that period?
Yeah.
Ground level, perhaps? Changing to a
Well,
ground
they don't
level
dig
technique?
that deep post holes.
Yeah.
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 And seven more is removed by agricultural activities.
Yeah.
and other activities.
Because that's quite different.
It's a general thing for Scandinavia. Well, we find Viking age buildings here and there, but normally they're very elusive.
So in that case, what is that?
Places like that where you have earth-fast construction going continuously right the way through, you know, into the Viking Age, into the 8th, 9th,
It's
10th.
regionally determined.
Right.
I think so you have certain areas where they disappear. There are a few sites where you have just a few stone foundations or posts there, so it seems that there are some kind of framework structure being introduced, which leaves much less trace.
Right.
But there's a new study which actually indicates that these framework structures may be more common also in earlier periods, so that in certain regions we simply overlook them.
Right. That's really interesting.
The trenches are very shallow. Like if I look at the depth of your trenches, it's like
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
This is true. True.
could they have been adopting that technique? Of
No.
No.
No, not that early. The evidence of that it comes from the east, from the Russian area, Slavic area.
Well, the Gokstad ship, doesn't the burial chamber?
Yes, but it's a very rough joining together of logs. It's not the proper building, and we have well boxes from the 9th century as well, where you have that kind of corner fittings. But building houses is a different thing. But
also from Benelux.
yeah.
But if you can't see them, I mean, how do you know if you can't if they're invisible?
Well, sometimes on occasions we find undisturbed settlements from this period, and there should be stone foundations if there were timber buildings, and then we don't find them. Well, we find them in the 11th century, but not back in the 10th and 9th. So, but there are regional differences there. In northern Sweden, they claim to have corner timber buildings in the early Viking period. But it might be the same thing as you say about the framework buildings. That well, they were there before as well, but we haven't just find them. So the main thing is probably that the digging of substantial post holes ends. Yeah, and frame and corner timber buildings take over, but it's very difficult to find.
Cool. Sorry.
We get the same in Scotland, but it starts earlier. In the 3rd century AD, we get the end of the roundhouse tradition with deeply set post holes, very obvious buildings. After the 3rd century, the settlement evidence on the mainland is almost impossible to identify, and it's probably because they're building turf-based structures, but also framework timber buildings as well. We can see that in some of the ramparts. They have no below ground traces. They're all above ground, and they're all mortise and tenon joints. And occasionally they get burnt in situ and you can actually see them.
Yeah.
Otherwise they would completely disappear.
Right.
And so on mainland Scotland we probably have about half a dozen Pictish settlements. That's it.
Yeah.
And even at Rhynie we do have some post holes, but the buildings don't entirely make sense just by themselves. Clearly that turf superstructures or above ground timbers as well.
But at Avaldsnes, luckily we have this economy area, this processing area, so we know there was activity. But the character of it and when there were kings or whatever were sitting there, we don't know. But there is activity going on, and there must have been people living there. So it is a continuation through that period.
Okay, maybe could we hold your question and bring people together for discussions?